Jax Thorne hated the smell of the Starlight Bazaar. The place reeked of desperation, ambition, and fried protein that had surely been food in another life. Jax wrinkled his nose, tugging at his weather-beaten jacket that had seen more space dust than the average planet. "Welcome back to the armpit of the galaxy," he muttered to himself, stepping over a pile of discarded synth fur. The bazaar was a swirling mass of chaotic energy, all neon lights and cacophonous shouts. Traders peddled dubious wares with even more dubious smiles, and every third stall promised deals better than a politician's promises, meaning you were guaranteed to get screwed. Jax paused at a stall selling genuine antique relics from the old Earth era, most of which were as genuine as a smile from his ex-wife. "Yeah, I'm sure a plastic fork survived the apocalypse," he snarked, shaking his head and moving on. He was here for something specific, something whispered about between gulps of black market booze and threats of interstellar war. Word was there was a piece of tech here, a relic from the before times, capable of doing things that would make the current galactic powers soil their fancy pants. Jax had an instinct for these things like a bloodhound, but one that preferred credits over treats. "Oi, Jax!" A voice cut through the din, rough and gravelly, like someone had recently used it to gargle nails. Jax turned, finding himself face to face with one of the bazaar's more colorful characters. Carla the Claw had earned her nickname not just because of her penchant for razor-tipped gloves, but because she could find one in your pocket without you noticing. She grinned, showing teeth that had met more than their fair share of bar fights. "Carla," Jax nodded. "Still doing freelance dentistry. You know it," she chuckled, her voice just as rough as before. "What brings you slumming back here? Looking for something shiny?" Jax replied cryptically, knowing full well that Carla was like a terrier with secrets. "Heard there's a piece of old tech worth its weight in hyperfuel." Carla's eyes gleamed, intrigued. "You mean that weapon everyone's whispering about? What, you developing a death wish or something?" "Not exactly," Jax said, looking around to make sure they weren't being overheard by anyone with pointy ears or more legs than usual. "I just like to know things that others don't." "Well, rumor has it," Carla leaned in, her voice now a conspiratorial whisper, "that the piece is being auctioned off tonight at the Black Crescent. High stakes, serious players, and even more serious bodyguards." "Sounds like my kind of party," Jax smirked, considering his options. The Black Crescent was notorious for two things: high-stakes deals and even higher body counts. Perfect place for someone with a death wish or an appetite for chaos. Jax spent the rest of the day weaving through the bazaar, picking up snippets of information like breadcrumbs, each leading him closer to the promised treasure. He brushed off dealers offering everything from counterfeit credits to pleasure bots with questionable consent protocols. As dusk descended, the Starlight Bazaar transformed, neon lights casting ominous glows that made the shadows dance with malicious glee. Jax donned his best blending in face, which usually looked like he was attempting to pass a difficult bowel movement, and headed toward the infamous Black Crescent. The venue itself was an architectural abomination, a mix of Art Deco and bad taste, but it served its purpose, a den for the desperate and the deadly. He entered through a side door, nodding to the bouncer, a massive brute with a face like a melted asteroid, who had the mental agility of a brick but the loyalty of a particularly aggressive golden retriever. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension and the smell of expensive liquor. Jax sidled up to the bar, ordering something that was technically drinkable, and surveyed the crowd. Among the usual suspects, smugglers, mercenaries, and the occasional sex bot with a malfunctioning modesty filter, were the real players, each looking like they'd slit their own mother's throat for a chance at the power the relic promised. That's when he saw her. A slender figure, draped in shadow like a bad habit, eyes like voids that drank in light and secrets alike. She was leaning against the bar, a glass of something ominously dark in her hand. Jax sidled closer, doing his best impression of someone who belonged. "Nice night for a bit of treason," he quipped, raising his glass in a toast to her. She turned those void-like eyes on him, and Jax resisted the urge to flinch. "If you're here for the relic, you're going to have to do better than bad jokes." "Who said I was joking?" Jax replied, his smile all wolfish charm. "Name's Jax Thorne, by the way. Maybe you've heard of me." She raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Should I have?" "Depends," Jax shrugged. "Do you usually keep tabs on handsome rogues with a penchant for trouble?" "Only when they're about to get themselves killed," she said dryly. Jax liked her already. "Then you'll want to keep an eye on me." Before the conversation could spiral into further flirtations or threats, the room went silent as a figure stepped onto the stage. Draped in shadows, the auctioneer's presence commanded attention, mostly because of the two hulking bodyguards flanking them, looking like they ate rocks for breakfast and washed them down with acid. "Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted others," the auctioneer began, voice smooth as a politician in campaign season, "tonight's auction item is truly one of a kind. A relic from the ancients, a device capable of shifting the very balance of power in the galaxy." A murmur rippled through the crowd, anticipation mingling with greed, each eye fixated on the stage as a covered object was brought out. Jax's heart thudded in his chest, the thrill of the chase mingling with the very real possibility of dying horribly. "The bidding begins now," the auctioneer announced, and the room erupted into chaos, numbers being thrown around like confetti at a particularly violent parade. Jax knew he was out of his depth, but that had never stopped him before. If he could just get close enough to see what the fuss was about, maybe he could figure out a way to swipe it from under their noses. "What's your plan, hero?" The woman from the bar was suddenly at his side, her voice a low murmur. "Not dying is top of the list," Jax replied, eyes fixed on the stage. "You in?" She gave a half-smile that was equal parts dangerous and intriguing. "I've heard worse ideas." As the bids climbed higher, Jax felt the gravity of the situation pulling him in deeper. This was it, the moment that could change everything, or at least get him shot, and he couldn't help but think it was about damn time. Jax found himself wedged between a woman who smelled like she'd bathed in burnt copper and a man whose face suggested he'd lost a long argument with a space shuttle. The auction was in full swing, and Thorne was as much a part of it as anyone else, though his wallet was about as useful as a screen door on a starship. The slender woman from the bar, now identified as Zainara by the way others treated her like she was 3 rungs higher on the social ladder, was still at his side. She leaned in, her voice a whisper. "You know, if you're planning on doing something stupid, now's the time to reconsider." Jax flashed her a grin that was all bravado, no substance. "Stupid's the only plan I ever make. Keeps things exciting." Zainara rolled her eyes, but there was a hint of amusement there. "Listen, Thorne, I know about the relic, more than these cretins attempting to auction it off." "It's not what everyone thinks." Jax raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "And what does everyone think it is?" "They think it's a weapon," Zainara said, her voice barely a breath over the din. "But it's actually worse. It's a key." "A key?" Jax echoed like he'd just been told the galaxy's best joke. "What, does it open the door to a really secret party?" "Something like that," she replied, her eyes scanning the room. "It's a key to a vault left by the ancients, filled with tech that makes our current tech look like toys." Jax let out a low whistle. "So, why tell me?" Zainara shrugged, a smirk twisting her features. "Maybe I like rooting for the underdog, or maybe I see a way to use you." "Your pick." "Well, aren't you just a fountain of altruism?" Jax replied, his mind working overtime. If what Zainara said was true, this relic was more than just a high-stakes bargaining chip. It was a golden ticket to untold power or, knowing his luck, a quick and messy death. Their conversation, already precarious, was interrupted by a loud crash at the entrance. The kind of crash that suggested someone had just entered with all the subtlety of a breaching pod. Heads turned, and the air grew thick with tension. A group of pirates strode in, led by a man who looked like he'd eaten a few too many protein bars and washed them down with testosterone supplements. His face was a map of scars and bad decisions, his grin as welcoming as a black hole. "Ah, just what we needed," Jax muttered to Zainara. "More assholes." The pirate leader, known by the whimsical name of Captain Tiberius Slag, surveyed the room with all the grace of a rhino in mating season. "Evening, folks," he boomed, voice like gravel in a blender. "I hear there's something shiny up for grabs, and I'm not one to miss out on shiny things." Jax exchanged a glance with Zainara. "Friends of yours?" he asked, voice dripping with sarcasm. "I prefer my friends to have less facial hair and more brain cells," she replied, eyes narrowing on the newcomers. The auctioneer, apparently having the survival instincts of a lemming, cleared his throat. "This is a private auction, Captain Slag. I'm afraid you'll have to." Slag cut him off with a laugh that could charitably be described as manic. "Private or not, I've got a vested interest in that relic. And by vested interest, I mean I'm taking it," Jax sighed. "Why is it every time I'm involved in something, it turns into a hostile takeover?" "Because you're you," Zainara quipped. "And because the universe has a sense of humor." The crowd had gone from tense to outright hostile, shifting like a hive of bees ready to sting. Jax knew things were about to get messy, and while he usually enjoyed a good brawl as much as the next ill-advised adrenaline junkie, this was not the time or place. "You got a plan for not dying?" Jax asked, edging closer to Zainara. She gave him a sideways glance. "Thought that was your specialty." "Yeah, well, I always appreciate extra input," he replied, eyes flicking around for an exit strategy that didn't involve a body bag. The situation escalated as quickly as a flashbang in a confined space. Slag's crew began spreading out, the kind of guys who looked like they'd misplaced their manners along with their ethics. The air crackled with tension, the kind that usually ended with someone losing a limb or worse. "Right," Jax said, loud enough for Zainara to hear over the growing din. "Time to make like a tree and get the hell out of here." "Agreed," she said, and they both started weaving toward the back, doing their best impressions of nonchalant drunks who'd lost their way. Slag was still barking orders, and the room was one wrong move away from sheer chaos. Jax could feel the energy shift, a palpable anticipation that was as familiar as it was dangerous. "Do you even know where you're going?" Zainara asked, her tone a mix of skepticism and begrudging hope. "Not a clue," Jax admitted. "But I trust my legs to take me somewhere that's not here," Zainara snorted. "That's comforting. Glad to be of service," Jax replied. They reached a side door, the kind that usually led to dumpsters and shady deals. Perfect. As they slipped through, Jax couldn't resist a parting shot. "Enjoy the party, Captain," he called back, then ducked as blaster fire erupted, the sound of violent punctuation to their retreat. In the narrow alley behind the Black Crescent, the darkness was their ally. Or at least Jax hoped it was. He had no idea where they were headed, but anywhere was better than a room full of trigger-happy idiots. "Now what?" Zainara asked, keeping pace with him as they darted through the tangled maze of backstreets. "Find a ship, get off this rock, and figure out how to keep breathing," Jax said. "In that order." "Ambitious," she noted, though with a hint of approval. "Ambitious is my middle name," Jax replied, skidding to a halt at a junction and peering around like a kid trying to cheat on an exam. "Also reckless, foolhardy, and currently terrified. You're a real catch, you know that," Zainara quipped, eyes scanning the path ahead for threats. "Don't let my ex-wives hear you say that," Jax grinned, though the humor didn't quite reach his eyes. The adrenaline was wearing thin, and the reality of their predicament was setting in like a hangover after a moonshine binge. They reached a quiet alleyway that looked less murdery than the others. Jax leaned against the wall, catching his breath. "So, Zainara," he said, voice lowering, "why are you really here? What's your stake in all this?" She considered him for a moment, eyes calculating. "Let's just say I've got my reasons. Some personal, some less so." "You're just full of vague answers, aren't you?" "It's a talent," she replied, a shadow of a smile playing on her lips. "And I bet you're not as clueless as you pretend to be, Thorn." "See, we're practically soulmates," Jax said, though his mind was whirring with possibilities. If Zainara had inside knowledge about the relic, she might be the key to navigating this whole mess. Of course, trusting her was about as wise as juggling plasma grenades, but desperate times and all that. "What's your next move then?" Zainara asked, resting against the wall beside him, her demeanor casual though the tension in her frame hinted otherwise. "Find the relic, figure out what makes it tick. Try not to die in the process. Stick with you for now," she replied, surprising him. "You've got a knack for survival, even if it is by sheer dumb luck." "Hey, luck's a skill," Jax countered. "One I'm damn good at." Their moment was interrupted by the sound of footsteps, a lot of footsteps echoing down the alley. Jax's heart sank. Slag's crew must have realized their absence and decided to rectify that particular oversight. "Time to move," Zainara said, her voice tight. "You read my mind," Jax replied, pushing off the wall and setting off at a jog. The footsteps grew louder, too close for comfort. Jax led them through the maze of alleys, each turn a gamble. He could hear the shouts behind them, a reminder that their pursuers were just as determined as they were, if significantly less charming. "You sure you know where we're going?" Zainara asked, keeping pace beside him. "Not a damn clue," Jax admitted, "but I'm committed to this nonsense." "Comforting," she said, her sarcasm a companionable constant. They reached a wider street, the neon glow of the bazaar still pulsing like a bad techno beat. Jax scanned for an escape, eyes landing on a heavily modified starship parked like it owned the place. "That our ride?" Zainara asked, following his gaze. "Looks fast, doesn't it?" Jax grinned, and without waiting for an answer, he sprinted toward it, Zainara right on his heels. The footsteps behind them were a constant reminder that time was of the essence. Reaching the ship, Jax quickly assessed the situation. The entrance was guarded by a security system that looked more like a challenge than a deterrent. "You any good with these things?" he asked Zainara, nodding at the console. "I'm a quick learner," she said, moving to the terminal and setting to work with a focus that was both impressive and mildly terrifying. Jax kept an eye on the alley, watching as the shadows grew larger, the pirates hot on their trail. He could feel his pulse in his throat, a constant drumbeat of urgency. "Got it," Zainara announced, the ship's door sliding open with a satisfying hiss. "After you," Jax said, gesturing grandly despite the circumstances. They scrambled aboard, Jax immediately heading for the cockpit. The ship was a sleek beast, built for speed over comfort, and that suited him just fine. He flicked switches with the confidence of a man who had no idea what he was doing but was damned if he'd show it. Zainara joined him, settling into the co-pilot seat as the engines roared to life with a purr that suggested it could probably outrun a supernova. "Hang on," Jax warned, his fingers dancing over the controls. The ship lifted off with a jolt, accelerating like a bat out of hell, or in this case, a thief out of an auction gone sideways. As they soared into the sky, leaving the chaos of the bazaar behind, Jax couldn't help but laugh, the sound rough and unfiltered. "Well, that went well." "Not dead yet," Zainara agreed, a smile tugging at her lips despite everything. "That's the spirit," Jax said, guiding the ship into open space, the stars stretching before them like an endless promise of trouble and opportunity. It was far from over, but for now they'd survived. And in Jax's book, that was a win. In the quiet of the cockpit with the universe laid out before them, Jax allowed himself a moment of reflection. The relic, the pirates, the woman beside him, all pieces of a puzzle that promised danger and discovery in equal measure. "What's so funny?" Zainara asked, curious. Jax shook his head, a grin still firmly in place. "Just thinking," he said, "about how much I love a good underdog story. And if he had his way, this one was just beginning." As the cockpit lights dimmed to a reassuring glow, Jax Thorne sat back in his chair, the grin still plastered across his face like a one-man comedy club. His laugh was still bouncing around the enclosed space, a rough, unpolished sound that was as comfortable as an old pair of space boots. Zainara tilted her head, watching him like an anthropologist observing a particularly intriguing specimen. "Underdog stories, huh?" she mused, a smirk playing on her lips like a cat with a secret. "I've heard a fair share, but I can't say I've ever been part of one. That's the beauty of it," Jax replied, winking. "Everyone loves rooting for the little guy." Zainara rolled her eyes. "I hate to break it to you, but we might be a little too little for comfort." Jax shrugged, the kind of shrug that suggested he'd long since accepted his place as the universe's favorite chew toy. I've been in worse spots, probably. Besides, I've got a knack for falling upwards. Is that what you call it? I thought it was more like falling sideways with a lot of screaming." She picked up a datapad and started swiping through the star charts with the casual efficiency of someone who had done this 1,000 times. He leaned over, watching her fingers dance across the screen. "So, got any idea where this relic of Ior's might be hiding?" Zainara's eyes didn't leave the screen. "If I knew that, we wouldn't be having this conversation, would we, Taché?" Jax turned his attention to the console, the buzzing holograms a comforting sort of chaos. It took his mind off the fact that they were flying blind in a universe that had a particularly twisted sense of humor. After a moment, Zainara sighed. "All right, let's see what these ancient star maps have to offer." "Ah, the ancients," Jax said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "The original control freaks of the galaxy." "They did love their secrets," Zainara agreed, tapping away. "And burying them under layers of cryptic nonsense. See?" Jax grinned. "It's like a scavenger hunt, only the stakes are higher and there's a good chance of dying." "You're a natural motivational speaker, Jax. Thanks. I do weddings too." She laughed despite herself, shaking her head. "Okay, here we go. This sector looks promising." She pointed to a cluster of stars, the kind of place that didn't advertise itself on the usual cosmic tourist itineraries. Jack squinted at the display. "Looks like a nice spot for a picnic, if you're into vacuum and radiation." "Better than a pirate's den," Zainara countered, tapping a few more commands. "We should be able to slip in without attracting too much attention." "Famous last words," Jax muttered, setting coordinates. The ship hummed in agreement, the engines preparing to launch them into another adventure that was almost certainly ill-advised. As they hurtled through the starlit void, Jax couldn't help but feel a flicker of hope. The kind of hope that usually led to more trouble than it was worth, but at least it kept things interesting. The relic, the key, the ancient tech, it all loomed before them like an unfinished story begging for a writer. Zainara glanced at him, her expression a mix of curiosity and caution. "Why do you do it?" "Do what?" "This," she gestured around the cockpit. "Chasing relics, running from pirates, risking your neck for." "What exactly?" Jax paused, considering. "Adventure mostly, opportunity, and maybe a little bit of the thrill that comes from flipping the universe the bird." "Reckless and poetic," she commented, not unkindly. "A dangerous combination. That's me, living on the edge except when I'm falling over it." Their banter was interrupted by the ship's alarm, a shrill jangle that suggested something had decided to rain on their parade. "What's that?" Zainara asked, eyes narrowing as she scanned the display. "Trouble," Jax replied, tapping at the controls to get a clearer picture. "Looks like Slag's boys aren't as dumb as they look." A blip on the radar confirmed it, a cluster of ships closing in, the kind that screamed piracy louder than a neon sign in a seedy bar. Their rivals had found them and they weren't here for a friendly chat. "Think they want to negotiate?" Zainara asked, an eyebrow raised. "Probably. But their negotiation style usually involves a lot of shouting and shooting," Jax said, hands moving swiftly over the controls. "Time to show them our customer service skills." The ship lurched as it banked sharply, Jax pushing it to its limits. The cockpit was filled with the sound of engines straining, a symphony of metal and defiance. As the pirates closed in, Jax jinked the ship left and right, weaving through the stars like a drunken dancer. Their pursuers were close, too close for comfort, and the odds were not exactly in their favor. "What's the plan?" Zainara asked as the cockpit rattled with the effort of staying one step ahead. "Improvise," Jax replied, flipping switches like a man possessed. and hope they haven't updated their playbook since the last time. You mean they're predictable? About as predictable as a rabid space weasel, but yeah. The pirates were gaining ground, their ships weaving through space with an ease that suggested they'd done this many times before. Jax nudged Zainara. You know how to handle a blaster. Only if you want the ship to have more holes in it. Good enough, he said, nodding toward the weapon's controls. Just keep pressing buttons until something useful happens. As Zainara took up the challenge, Jax focused on keeping them alive, the ship bucking as it dodged beam after beam of concentrated malice. The first volley from their ship was a little overzealous, the shots going wide and taking out a chunk of nearby asteroid instead. Hey, nice shot, Jax called over the din. Shut up and fly, Thorn, Zainara shot back, adjusting her aim. The second volley found its mark, clipping one of the pirate ships and sending it spinning into the void. See, you're a natural, Jax quipped, ducking to avoid another blast. Now let's see if we can turn this into more than a one-hit wonder. Zainara's reply was lost in the roar of the engines as Jax pushed them harder, the ship streaking through space like a comet with a death wish. Another pirate ship peeled off, smoke trailing like a bad habit. They were making headway, but the rest of the pack was relentless. Got any more tricks up your sleeve? Zainara shouted, eyes fixed on the closing ships. One or two, Jax admitted, his fingers moving like a pianist on speed. Let's see if they remember how to dance. With a flick of a switch, Jax deployed a scatter of flares, the space around them lighting up like a supernova's cheap cousin. The sudden burst of light and heat confused their pursuers, causing them to scatter like startled pigeons. Nice move, Zainara acknowledged, glancing at him with something resembling admiration. Too bad it won't last, Jax said, his tone as dry as Martian dust. But it might buy us a few minutes. The ship banked hard again, Jax's eyes flicking between the displays and the swirling chaos outside. The pirates were regrouping, and he needed a plan before they found another way to ruin his day. As they shot past another asteroid field, Jax's mind raced. The bazaar's hidden sector was close, a shadowy labyrinth of forgotten routes and smugglers' caches. It was risky, but then again, playing it safe had never been his style. Zainara, he called, a hint of urgency in his voice. How do you feel about a little hide and seek? I'm game if you think you can shake them, she replied, her eyes sharp and ready for anything. I don't need to shake them, Jax grinned. I just need to lose them long enough to make a plan. He threw the ship into a hard dive, aiming for the thick of the asteroid field. The ship trembled as it weaved through the rocky maze, the pursuing pirates hesitating as their quarry dove into the chaos. The cockpit shuddered as debris glanced off the hull, the ship groaning under the strain. Jax pushed it harder, aware that every second counted. Got anything in mind for when we stop running? Zainara asked, her voice steady despite the chaos. Working on it, Jax replied, his focus narrowing to the task at hand. Might involve more running or possibly less. That's reassuring. Glad to be of service, he said, the ship finally breaking through the last of the asteroids into the relative safety of a nebula's edge. The pursuing pirates hesitated, unwilling to dive blindly into the obscuring cloud. Looks like they lost their nerve, Zainara observed, watching the blips on the radar halt. For now, Jax agreed, easing back on the throttle. Which means we've got a little breathing room. So, what's the next move? Jax thought for a moment, the possibilities tumbling through his mind like dice in a rigged game. We head for that hidden sector, figure out what makes this relic tick, and maybe, just maybe, get ourselves out of this mess. Zainara nodded, her expression a mix of determination and resignation. Sounds like a plan, or something that resembles one. Plans are overrated, Jax said with a shrug. I prefer to call them flexible guidelines. Whatever helps you sleep at night. Who said anything about sleeping? Jax grinned, setting a course for the sector and watching the stars slip past like old friends with questionable intentions. With a little luck and a lot of reckless courage, they might just find what they were looking for. But then again, in Jack's Thorne's world, the only thing you could count on was chaos, and he wouldn't have it any other way. Jack's Thorne squinted at the console, then glanced over at Zainara with a look that was either confidence or constipation. It was hard to be sure in the dim light of the cockpit. "All right, our lovely blue ball of death should be right around here somewhere," he announced, as if they were searching for a misplaced sock rather than the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. "I'll admit, your navigational precision is impressive," Zainara said dryly, scanning the holographic readout. "Only slightly less accurate than a blindfolded drunk playing darts." "Hey, those darts might be strategic, you never know," Jax replied, tapping a few buttons with the reckless enthusiasm of a toddler with a toy drum. "And if you think I'm bad, you should see Slag trying to find his own ship in a parking lot." As if on cue, the ship's sensors pinged softly, highlighting a previously hidden structure nestled within the swirling nebulae. It was a vault, angular, ancient, and ominously quiet, like the universe's most foreboding library. "Looks like we've found our needle in a cosmic haystack," Zainara said, her voice a blend of awe and trepidation. "Let's just hope there isn't a librarian with a laser rifle down there." Jack snorted, guiding the ship closer. "I've had overdue fees scarier than that." The vault's entrance loomed ahead, a stark metal maw that seemed ready to swallow them whole. The ship settled onto the surface with a reluctant thud, like a cat on a vet's table. Jax and Zainara suited up, their banter muffled slightly by the helmets. "You know," Jax said, checking the seals, "I always wondered why these relics are never hidden somewhere nice, like a beach." "Because you can't have a dramatic showdown on a beach," Zainara replied, adjusting her visor. "Unless you're really into sandcastle wars." The airlock hissed open with a sound that was half sigh, half sneer. They stepped out into the vault, the oppressive silence so thick it could have been cut with a very underwhelming knife. Inside, the vault was a dimly lit labyrinth, corridors snaking away in every direction, each one more menacingly indistinct than the last. The walls were etched with ancient symbols, their meanings lost to time and bad graffiti artists. "All right," Jack said, clapping his hands together. "Let's find us a big, shiny key. Or a bigger, shinier trap," Zainara muttered, pulling out a datapad to map their progress. They moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing like a bad echo in a worse horror movie. Trust the ancients to have a flair for the theatrics, Jax thought. As they ventured deeper, the vault seemed to close in around them, the air thick with the dust of millennia past. "Bet you a week's rations this ends with us needing therapy," Jax said, trying to lighten the mood. "That's optimistic," Zainara replied. "I was thinking more along the lines of a closed-casket funeral." They reached a chamber that seemed important enough to be the control center, if the control center was designed by someone who had a deep-seated loathing of user-friendliness. A pedestal stood in the center, a relic nested atop it like an egg about to hatch doom. "Looks like we've found the prize," Jack said, stepping forward with the kind of bravado that had gotten him into this life in the first place. "Careful," Zainara warned. "This place is likely booby-trapped like a paranoid squird's nut stash." Jax reached out, half expecting the room to explode into a kaleidoscope of deadly lasers. Instead, the relic sat there, suspiciously compliant. "See? Totally not a trap," Jax declared, just as the floor lurched beneath them with a groan that suggested it was deeply unhappy with their presence. A series of metallic shutters slammed shut over the exits, the room's lighting switching from uncomfortable dimness to an altogether more alarming shade of red. "Ah, there it is," Jax said, deadpan. "I was starting to feel unloved." "Fantastic," Zainara said, eyeing the now-sealed doors. "We're trapped. Just like the last time I tried to make toast in the ship's galley." The relic, perhaps feeling left out, hummed to life, projecting a holographic display of complex patterns and cryptic symbols that hovered in the air like the galaxy's hardest Sudoku puzzle. "Great," Jax said, eyeing the display. "I always love a good challenge. Especially one where the stakes are my life." Don't worry, Zainara said, examining the symbols. I've had worse puzzles, like that time I tried to figure out what was in galactic gruel. They both focused on the holographic display, trying to decipher the meaning behind the swirling chaos of light. Looks like some kind of pattern, Jax said, squinting at the symbols. Anything beyond looks like? Zainara asked. Well, there's a lot of squiggles and some angry-looking triangles, Jax replied unhelpfully. Maybe it's an angry triangle party. Let's try something crazy, Zainara suggested, flipping through screens on her datapad. Thinking. She tapped a few commands, overlaying a star map with the symbols. Slowly, a pattern emerged, a grid aligning with constellations long forgotten by all but the universe's most diligent historians. I think it's a map, she said, excitement creeping into her voice. A map of a star system we haven't charted yet. Great, Jax said, but how does that help us not get squished into space pancakes? There's a sequence here, Zainara pointed out, tracing a path through the symbols. Like a combination lock. Jax nodded, focusing on the task with the intensity of someone who just realized their life depended on not screwing up. All right, let's crack this sucker open. Together, they began manipulating the holographic symbols, aligning them into a sequence that felt right in the way only life and death puzzles can. It took time that felt like eternity as the room around them growled and shifted, as if to remind them that patience was not its virtue. Finally, with a soft chime, the symbols locked into place. The vault shuddered, and the doors slid open with a resigned hiss, as if conceding defeat. Well, that was easy, Jax said, exhaling heavily, his hands trembling just slightly. Sure, if you consider life-threatening puzzles a casual pastime, Zainara replied, rolling her eyes. They stepped back into the corridor, the oppressive weight of the vault lifting ever so slightly as they made their way back to the ship. Let's get out of here before something else decides to get feisty, Jax suggested, a spring in his step that wasn't there before. Or a librarian with a vendetta shows up, Zainara added, not entirely joking. They were almost back to the ship when the comms crackled to life, Slag's voice dripping with smugness. Having fun, Thorn? Slag, Jax said, his voice as falsely cheerful as a politician's promise. You know, I was just thinking about you, mostly about how much I'd love to never see your face again. Too bad, Slag replied. I've got a rendezvous planned. Just you, me, and that little toy you just picked up. Sounds cozy, Jax said, flicking a switch to prime the ship's engines. But I'm afraid we already have plans. Cancel them, Slag said, his voice hardening. Or I'll cancel you. The signal cut out, leaving Jax and Zainara in a silence that was anything but comfortable. Guess we overstayed our welcome, Zainara said, starting the preflight checks. Seems like it, Jax agreed, his mind racing through possibilities like a caffeinated squirt on a power line. But on the bright side, at least we know we're popular. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting them from the vault's surface with a judder that was more comforting than silence. As they broke free of the vault's embrace, the radar lit up with hostile contacts. Slag's ships were closing in, their intent clear and unfriendly. Think we can outrun them? Zainara asked, her hands flying over the controls. Sure, Jax replied, assuming they all suddenly decide they want to be honest traders. Zainara gave him a look that spoke volumes about their odds. So, the usual then. Got it in one, Jax said, grinning despite the odds. Let's show them how professionals flee. The ship banked hard, engines kicking into overdrive as they shot toward the cover of the nebula. Behind them, Slag's ships followed like a pack of rabid dogs, eager for the scent of blood. Jax and Zainara maneuvered through the dense cloud, the ship's hull glowing with the intensity of their escape attempt. The pirates were persistent, but the nebula offered a myriad of hiding spots and diversions. Try to keep them guessing, Jax shouted over the roar of the engines, adrenaline surging through his veins. This place is a maze. Like my favorite kind of puzzle, Zainara replied, her fingers dancing over the navigation controls. Impossible and infuriating, Jax laughed, a sound that was more bravado than humor. And here I thought you didn't like puzzles. Only when they don't have a chance to kill me, she corrected, guiding the ship through a tight gap between two asteroids. The pirates, less adept at maneuvering through the nebula's treacherous paths, struggled to keep up, their ship scraping against rocks and debris. Looks like they're having a bad day, Jax commented, taking a moment to appreciate their handiwork. Let's make it worse, Zainara suggested, running a quick diagnostic on their weapon systems. I'm feeling generous. You generous? Jax quipped, arming the ship's blasters. I'm shocked. They opened fire, a barrage of energy beams cutting through the nebula like angry lightning. One of Slag's ships took a direct hit, spiraling out of control before disappearing in a flash of light. That's one less problem, Zainara said, the corner of her mouth twitching in satisfaction. 999 to go. Who's counting? Jax replied, guiding the ship into a tight barrel roll to avoid incoming fire. The remaining pirate ships peeled off, clearly reevaluating their chances against a target that wasn't going down without a fight. For now, Jax and Zainara had a moment to breathe. Let's not stick around to see if they get any bolder, Jax suggested, setting a course away from the chaos. Agreed, Zainara said, already plotting their escape route. I've had enough excitement for one day. With the pirates temporarily at bay, Jax and Zainara focused on their next objective, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Slag while figuring out what the relic truly unlocked. The stars stretched ahead, a vast expanse of uncertainty and opportunity. As they sped away from the danger, Jax couldn't help but feel a familiar thrill, a reminder of why he chased these wild dreams in the first place. As the ship slipped into the darkness of space, leaving the chaos behind, Jax turned to Zainara. So, where to next? Anywhere but here, she replied, her eyes set on the horizon. And maybe somewhere with a good bar. Now you're talking my language, Jax said, setting their course for the nearest habitable system. Let's see where this adventure takes us. And as they sailed into the unknown, the universe held its breath, waiting to see what chaos this reckless duo would unleash next. Jax leaned back in his seat, glancing over to Zainara, who was too busy plotting their escape course to notice him. The nebula's chaotic light cast unsettling shadows across the cockpit, making him feel like he was trapped in a bad horror holofilm. The kind where everyone dies because they're too stupid to stay in the ship. So, Jax said, feigning nonchalance as he adjusted their trajectory. What's your plan for when Slag's goons catch up? Charm them with your sparkling wit. Only if your brilliant piloting draws them in first, she shot back, her fingers dancing over the controls with a speed that would make a pianist jealous. The ship shuddered, the hull groaning as if auditioning for a role as a haunted house. Jax squinted at the radar. More blips than a drunken artist's canvas. Looks like we've got fans, groupies. Always wanted those, Zainara muttered. But I was hoping for something less homicidal. Beggars, choosers, and all that, Jax replied, flicking a switch to engage the cloaking device. Or at least he hoped it was the cloaking device and not the self-destruct. They'd been meaning to label those for ages. As they disappeared into the swirling mists, a voice crackled over the comms, oily and insistent. Thorn, you slippery bastard. Don't think you can hide. Slag, Jax replied, his voice dripping with faux cheer. I see you've come to grace us with your delightful presence. Hand over the relic, Slag demanded, and maybe I'll let you keep breathing. Tempting offer, but I'm rather attached to my lungs, Jax said, exaggerating a sigh. So how about you go find a nice black hole to shove yourself into? The comms cut out, leaving a silence thick enough to choke on. Jax turned to Zainara, who wore an expression somewhere between amused and murderous. Guess he didn't like your suggestion. Who knew? Jax shrugged. I've always thought my conversational skills were my best asset. The ship rattled violently, the result of Slag's crew making good on their threats. Jax cursed under his breath, fingers dancing over the controls as he tried to keep them from becoming space debris. Any chance you've got a backup plan? Zainara asked, her voice calm despite the chaos. Backup plans are for people who don't suck at improvising, Jax replied, sweat beading on his forehead. And unfortunately, I'm an expert in the latter. The console beeped insistently, a bright flash on the radar indicating Slag's ships were closing in like vultures to a carcass. Jax wrestled the controls, guiding them deeper into the nebula. We could always try talking to them again, Zainara suggested, sarcasm dripping from her words. Sure, I'll just pull out my charm and wit, Jax replied. Oh wait, I left those in my other space pants. A sudden impact jolted the ship, alarms blaring as the cloaking device failed spectacularly. Jax swore, trying to regain control. The pirates had found them. Looks like they're not in the mood for small talk, Zainara noted dryly. Yeah, they're more of a shoot first, ask questions never kind of crowd, Jax agreed, yanking hard on the controls. The ship hurtled through the nebula, the pirates hot on their tail. Jax's mind raced, trying to come up with something, anything, that could get them out of this mess. Just then, an explosion rocked the ship. The cockpit filled with smoke and the lights flickered ominously. Well, that's not good, Jax said, coughing through the acrid air. No kidding. If I wanted to be roasted, I'd have just stayed in the galley, Zainara shot back, waving at the smoke. As the ship spun out of control, Jax fought to stabilize it, but Slag's voice returned, smug and infuriating. Give it up, Thorn. You're outmatched, outgunned, and honestly out of your damn mind. Wow, you really know how to butter a guy up, Jax replied, teeth gritted as he struggled with the controls. What's next? Dinner and flowers, last chance, Slag warned. Hand over the relic or I'll make this quick. Jax glanced at Zainara, who gave him a look that was equal parts exasperation and determination. Looks like we're in a pickle, he said, forcing a grin. More like the entire jar, she corrected, grabbing a blaster from beneath her seat. Suddenly, the ship jerked, and the pirates' boarding pod latched onto their hull, a sickening thud echoing through the ship as they breached the airlock. Well, they're not wasting time, Jax noted, pulling his own weapon free. I'd hoped for a more leisurely beatdown. Guess we'll have to improvise, Zainara said, shouldering her blaster with practiced ease. The cockpit door exploded inward, smoke and sparks flying as the pirates charged in, weapons raised. Jax and Zainara fired back, the space between them filled with streaks of energy and the acrid smell of burnt circuits. Jax ducked behind the console, taking a moment to catch his breath. Having fun yet? He called over the din. Loads. We should do this more often, Zainara replied, her tone as dry as a Martian desert. The pirates pressed their advantage, their numbers overwhelming. Jax knew this was it, a last stand in a tin can with someone who might as well have been his sister. As his ammo ran low, he exchanged a glance with Zainara. This was how it always was with them, fighting the odds, refusing to go quietly. But reality had a way of kicking you in the teeth when you least expected it. A particularly large pirate, sporting a grin that could curdle milk, got the drop on Zainara. With a swift, brutal motion, he disarmed her and slammed her against the wall. Zainara! Jax yelled, but he was pinned down, unable to reach her. Get them both! Slag barked over the comms, his voice dripping with triumph as the pirates wrestled Zainara into a pair of handcuffs, dragging her towards the airlock. Looks like we've got a new guest, Slag continued, his image flickering on the cracked view screen. Make it easy on yourself, Thorn. Hand over the relic. Jax felt desperation clawing at his throat. If he didn't do something fast, they were both done for. But the reality was grim and humorless. He was outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. So what's the plan, big hero? Slag taunted, his voice a sneer through the speakers. Jax hesitated, his mind a maelstrom of half-baked ideas and sheer panic. He held the relic, this supposedly powerful key to ancient tech, tightly in his grasp. His last card to play, but one he didn't fully understand. Fine, Jax said, raising his hands in a mock surrender. You win this round, but I'm warning you it's defective, might blow up in your face. Gotta love a guy who knows when to fold, Slag replied, his laughter grating in Jax's ears. Bring it here. Jax moved cautiously, watching as Zainara was shoved back into the pirate pod, a silent promise of retribution in her eyes. "Don't do it, Jax," she shouted, struggling against her captors. "You know what they'll do with it." "Silence her," Slag ordered, and one of his men clamped a hand over her mouth. Jax was cornered, the relic heavy in his hands. He moved towards the pirates, all too aware that once he handed this over, the galaxy would be a very different and much darker place. As he stepped forward, every instinct screamed to fight, to resist, but reality was a merciless beast. He was outmatched, and the weapon was nearly out of his hands. "Come on, Thorn," Slag urged, eyes glinting with greed. "Let's see if this little toy of yours is worth the trouble." Jax hesitated at the precipice of decision, his mind racing for alternatives that refused to present themselves. Zainara's eyes met his, pleading, defiant. In that moment Jax realized something. Defeat wasn't the end. Not yet. There were still cards to play, moves to make. But first he had to survive, to fight another day. "All right," Jax said, nodding slowly. "You want it. Come and get it." With a sudden, reckless motion, he tossed the relic towards the pirates, a calculated risk based on desperation and sheer audacity. The relic hit the floor, skidding across the metal with a sound that echoed in the charged silence. The pirate who went to retrieve it bent down, and as his fingers closed around the relic, Jax lunged. Using the moment of distraction, he fired a shot at the control panel, the ship system sparking violently. The lights flickered, alarms blaring anew as the ship lurched, the remnants of its systems protesting the abuse. In the chaos, Jax dove for cover, the relic clutched once more in his hands as he scrambled to regroup. "Get them!" Slag roared, but the ship's instability made the pirates falter, their footing lost in the confusion. Jax didn't waste any time, knowing full well that this was a fragile reprieve. He bolted through the corridor, weaving through smoke and debris, determination driving him forward. But he wasn't out of the woods yet. The pirates were regrouping, recovering from his brief distraction. He needed a way to turn the tables, to use this chaos to his advantage and get Zainara back. As he raced through the ship's narrow corridors, his mind whirled with possibilities. He had a slim chance, a desperate gamble that might just give them both a fighting chance. Jax skidded to a halt in the cargo bay, the pirate's boarding pod looming like a sinister shadow. He could see Zainara in the airlock, fighting against her restraints as the pirates tried to move her through. "Jax!" she shouted, her voice carrying over the clash and clatter. He glanced around, his eyes catching sight of a loose cargo crate balanced precariously on its rack. It wasn't much, but it was something, a tool, a weapon if he played it right. Drawing a deep breath, Jax braced himself. The galaxy might have a twisted sense of humor, but he wasn't going down without a punchline of his own. He just needed one good shot. "Hey, Slag," Jax called out, his voice a defiant challenge that echoed through the chaos. "Catch!" With a swift kick, he sent the crate hurtling towards the airlock. It crashed into the pirates with a satisfying crunch, the impact enough to free Zainara from her captor's grip. "Now, Zainara!" Jax yelled, extending a hand as the airlock began to close. She didn't hesitate, launching herself towards him with an agility born of desperation and trust. He caught her, pulling her to safety as the airlock sealed the pirates out with a final, grinding thud. Together they stumbled back, the relic clutched between them like a lifeline. The pirates, battered but not beaten, pounded on the door, their roars muffled by the thick metal. Jax looked at Zainara, her breath coming hard and fast, eyes wide with the adrenaline of survival. "Guess we gave them something to think about," he said, a grin tugging at his lips despite the exhaustion. "Never doubted you for a second," she replied, the corners of her mouth twitching in response. But as they huddled in the relative safety of the hold, the reality of their situation settled over them. They weren't out of the fight yet, not by a long shot. The relic was still in their hands, the key to a mystery they barely understood, and Slag wasn't going to let them slip away easily. But for now, they'd bought themselves time, a chance to regroup, to plan, to find a way to turn this bleak scenario on its head. Jax sighed, leaning back against the bulkhead, his mind already racing ahead. So he said, glancing at Zainara with a weary grin. What's next? She chuckled, shaking her head. I don't know, Jax. But whatever it is, it's bound to be one hell of a ride. And with that, they turned their eyes to the stars, ready to face whatever the universe decided to throw at them next. Jack's Thorn leaned against the bulkhead, the relic cradled awkwardly in his grip like it was a newborn with a bad attitude. His mind raced through possibilities like a hyperactive squirt on caffeine. Slag and his merry band of pirates were still banging on the airlock door, and it wouldn't be long before they'd find a way in. And then there was the relic, a key to the ancients' vault that everyone believed was a weapon. Funny how one little misunderstanding could get you killed. Think they'll give up if we ask nicely? Zainara asked, her voice tinged with mock innocence. Sure, maybe if we throw in a fruit basket and a sincere apology letter, Jax replied, his tone as dry as the air recycling systems that had seen better days. Great, because I've got a delightful selection of rotten apples and bitter regrets. Zainara rolled her eyes, leaning against the wall next to him. Her blaster was still warm, the faint smell of ozone clinging to it like a bad habit. Jax's thoughts were interrupted by a particularly loud thud from the airlock door. The pirates were getting creative, or desperate. Either way, he needed to act fast. He glanced at the relic, feeling the heft of responsibility and potential doom in its ancient design. You ever think those ancients had the right idea, leaving behind a bunch of enigmatic junk and letting everyone else fight over it? He mused. Only if their idea of a good time was watching idiots like a scramble around trying not to die, Zainara replied with a wry smile. Jax shook his head, a plan beginning to form in the murky depths of his mind. It was risky, borderline insane, but that was par for the course in his life. All right, listen. The relic isn't just a key, it's got a few tricks up its sleeve. I think I can use it to activate the vault's old defenses, give Slag and his crew a taste of ancient hospitality. Zainara raised an eyebrow, skepticism etched across her features. You're telling me this thing can do more than just look pretty and cause trouble? Hey, when you're dealing with technology that's older than my grandmother's mistrust of vegetables, you learn to expect surprises, Jax replied, turning the relic in his hands, searching for the hidden trigger he was sure was there. Trust me, I've got a knack for this kind of thing, like the time you reprogrammed the food synthesizer to only make protein paste. Zainara asked, her voice dripping with amusement. Hey, it was a learning experience. And in my defense, I was really hungry, Jax shot back, finally finding a series of small, intricate patterns on the relic. He pressed them in sequence, a hopeful prayer to whatever cosmic jokester might be listening. The relic hummed to life, its surface glowing with an eerie, shifting light. Jax felt a shiver of electricity run up his arm, a sensation that was half thrill, half terror. As the power surged through it, he knew they were committed now. Okay, here goes nothing, he muttered under his breath, holding the relic aloft like some sacred totem. The ship shuddered, and for a moment, Jax feared he'd just triggered a self-destruct sequence. But instead, the air around them crackled with energy, and a series of ancient mechanisms hidden within the ship's walls began to whir and clank to life. Is it supposed to sound like we're about to take off and crash at the same time? Zainara asked, her eyes darting around as the strange sounds filled the air. Pretty sure that's just the charm of ancient tech. They don't make them like they used to, Jax said, grinning despite himself. Now, let's see if this thing's got some bite. Outside the airlock, the pirates cursed and shouted as the ship's defenses activated. Holographic turrets materialized, spitting beams of energy that forced the pirates to scatter like cockroaches exposed to light. Slag's voice crackled over the comms, filled with anger and disbelief. What the hell have you done, Thorn? Slag demanded. Just giving you a taste of the past, Slag. You should thank me for the history lesson, Jax replied, unable to keep the smug satisfaction out of his voice. Zainara glanced at him, a mix of admiration and exasperation in her eyes. You know, you might actually pull this off. You sound surprised, Jax said, adjusting his grip on the relic as he planned their next move. I'm just shocked you didn't blow us up. Yet she replied, chuckling. With the pirates momentarily distracted by the ship's defenses, Jax knew they had a narrow window to make their next move. He turned to Zainara, his mind racing with the possibilities now open to them. We've got to get to the vault, Jax said, urgency lacing his words. If we can get there and open it, whatever's inside might give us the edge we need. And if it's just a bunch of old socks and mismatched silverware? Zainara asked, though her tone was hopeful. Then we use them as makeshift weapons and hope for the best, Jax replied, his grin a flash of mischief. Come on, let's not waste this chance. They moved through the ship, the corridors alive with the sounds of battle as the pirates struggled against the ancient defenses. Jax led the way, the relic guiding him like a compass with a cruel sense of humor. As they neared the vault, the ship's sensors pinged in warning, indicating the presence of more intruders. Well, looks like we've got company, Zainara said, her hand tightening on her blaster. I'm starting to think Slag really likes us, Jax replied, his voice laced with sarcasm. Must be our winning personalities. As they rounded a corner, a group of pirates came into view, weapons drawn and ready. Jax didn't hesitate, trusting in Zainara's aim and his own luck. He fired first, the corridor lighting up with the exchange of energy blasts. Zainara picked off two of the pirates with precision shots, while Jax provided cover, his own blaster weaving a chaotic pattern of destruction. The pirates fell back, retreating under the onslaught. Nice shooting, Jax said, his confidence buoyed by their small victory. Thanks. Let's just hope there aren't more of them lurking around the corner, Zainara replied, already moving forward. They reached the vault, an imposing structure that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Jax approached it cautiously, the relic vibrating gently in his hand as if eager to reveal its secrets. Well, here's hoping this thing is more than just an oversized key fob, Jax muttered, positioning the relic against the vault's surface. He held his breath, waiting for the miracle or disaster that would follow. The vault responded immediately, its surface rippling as if awakening from a long slumber. Runes glowed, tracing patterns that danced across the metal. With a low rumble, the door began to open, revealing darkness beyond. Always wondered what a vault full of disappointment looked like, Zainara quipped, peering into the abyss. Jax chuckled, stepping into the vault with a mix of caution and anticipation. The air inside was cool, almost sentient in the way it seemed to embrace them. As their eyes adjusted, they saw rows of strange devices, each more bewildering than the last. This is it, Jax breathed, all creeping into his voice despite himself. The ancient's legacy, Zainara nodded, her expression one of grudging respect. If we can figure out how to use this stuff, we might just have a fighting chance. Jax felt the weight of the relic in his hand, the potential it represented. It was more than just a key, it was hope, a slim chance against the odds stacked high against them. All right, let's figure out what's useful and what's just going to get us killed, Jax said, moving further into the vault, his eyes scanning the shelves. They worked quickly, adrenaline sharpening their senses. Each device they examined held a story, a fragment of a civilization long gone, yet crucial to their survival. Among the clutter of ancient tech, Jax's eyes landed on a device that seemed to pulse with power. Think this could do the trick? Jax asked, holding up the device, its surface shimmering with an internal light. Zainara examined it, nodding slowly. Looks promising. And by promising, I mean it's either going to save us or blow us to pieces. Guess there's only one way to find out, Jax said, his grin returning. How about we give Slag a surprise he won't forget together? They turned to leave the vault, determination etched into their features. The universe might have been a cruel, unyielding place, but Jax and Zainara were determined to carve out their own destiny, one explosion, one sarcastic quip at a time. As they faced the ship once more, the sounds of battle mingling with the hum of ancient technology, Jax felt a thrill of excitement. They were underdogs in a galaxy that loved nothing more than to chew you up and spit you out. But with the vault's secrets in their hands, they had the means to turn the tables. "Ready to make some noise?" Jax asked, his voice a challenge as they prepared to unleash the vault's potential. Zainara nodded, her eyes shining with the fire of shared purpose. "Let's give them something to remember us by." And with that, they stepped back into the chaos, unyielding and unbroken, ready to face whatever the universe had in store, with a wry smile and a determination that refused to die. Jax and Zainara made their way back through the ship's corridors, the chaos of the ongoing skirmish outside echoing like an unruly party they hadn't been invited to. The relic felt heavy in Jax's hand, a reminder that they were now in possession of both a potential salvation and an unpredictable explosive device. "So any idea what button we need to press to not die?" Zainara asked, her sarcasm a thin veil over genuine concern. "Not a damn clue," Jax replied, a grin spreading across his face. "But I'm a big fan of the wing it and see school of thought. Right, because that's worked so well for us up till now," she quipped, rolling her eyes. Yet there was a hint of excitement in her voice, the same thrill you'd get from playing cards with a deck that's 90% jokers. The corridors blurred past as they headed back towards the ship's control room. Behind them, the vault's door rumbled shut, keeping the rest of the ancient secrets far from greedy hands and trigger-happy fingers. Jax was still riding the high of activating the relic. Sure, they were neck-deep in trouble, but for the first time he felt like they might actually have the upper hand. "You know, I think we might just pull this off," he said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Optimism. From you?" Zainara shook her head in mock disbelief. "Maybe it's the recycled air messing with your brain." They skidded to a halt at the entrance to the cockpit, Jax immediately moving to the console. The holograms buzzed to life, bathing them in a cool glow. Outside, the ship's defenses were still giving the pirates a hard time, beams of energy crisscrossing the void like an impromptu fireworks display. "Looks like Slag and friends are getting a little too cozy out there," Jax noted, his fingers flying over the controls. "Time to introduce them to our new toy. Just as long as this doesn't end with us as cosmic dust," Zainara countered, checking her blaster with a habitual efficiency. Jax placed the relic on the console, watching as it interfaced with the ship systems. The holographic displays flickered, momentarily going dark before bursting back to life with renewed vibrancy. An ominous hum filled the cockpit, vibrating through every surface. "Here goes nothing," Jax muttered, flicking the final switch. Immediately, the ship shuddered as the relic's energy integrated with the onboard systems. Outside, the air shimmered with unseen power. The ship's cloaking device sprang to life, enveloping them in a protective veil. For a moment, the universe outside their small pocket of reality seemed to hold its breath. "Well, aren't we just full of surprises?" Zainara said, smirking at the readouts. Jax couldn't help but join in her amusement. "Let's give those pirates a reason to rethink their life choices." Through the comms, Slag's voice crackled once more, his fury palpable even through the static. "Thorn, what have you done? Our sensors are going wild, isn't it obvious?" Jax replied, unable to resist the urge to taunt their pursuers. "Just making things a bit more interesting. Thought you might appreciate some variety." The response was a series of unintelligible curses which Jax found oddly satisfying. They'd bought themselves some time, and with any luck that would be enough. "All right, what's next?" Zainara asked, her eyes scanning for threats like a seasoned predator. Jax tapped a few more commands into the console, his mind racing. "We need to use the relic's energy to supercharge the ship's weapons. If we can create a big enough shockwave, we might just send those pirates into an early retirement." "Bold move," Zainara nodded, her expression grim. "I like it." Jax couldn't help but chuckle. "Funny how it's the craziest plans that always seem to work, or get us killed," Zainara added dryly. "Details, details," Jax waved her off, focusing on the task at hand. The ship's systems hummed in response to the relic's power, the energy building into a crescendo that thrummed through the air. Jax's fingers danced over the controls, each movement a calculated risk. Outside, the pirates were regrouping, their ships maneuvering into attack formation. Slag's voice crackled over the comms again, this time betraying a hint of desperation. "Thorn, whatever you're doing, it's not going to work." Jax leaned forward, his grin sharp as a blade. "Oh, I think it's working just fine." Together, he and Zainara activated the ship's weapons, the relic pulsating with energy. The resulting blast was a marvel of destructive beauty, a wave of force that expanded outward, distorting space around it. It slammed into the pirate ships with all the subtlety of a brick through a window. The shockwave sent the pirates spiraling, their vessels caught in the gravitational chaos. Slag's ship took the worst of it, its hull groaning under the strain as systems flickered and died. "Looks like you just got schooled by the ancients," Jax called over the comms, relishing the moment. "History's a harsh teacher, isn't it?" Slag's response was an incoherent roar, cut short by another rattling impact. Zainara watched the chaos unfold, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes. Not bad for a couple of underdogs. Jax turned to her, the adrenaline leaving him lightheaded but exhilarated. Not bad at all. They watched as the surviving pirate ships, battered and broken, limped away into the void, their crews likely contemplating career changes. Slag's voice faded into the ether, a testament to the universe's twisted sense of humor that had, for once, played in their favor. With the immediate threat gone, the ship settled into a silence that felt almost sacred. Jax glanced at Zainara, a shared understanding passing between them. They'd survived against all odds and come out the other side with something more than just a relic. They'd found a way to fight back, to stand against the tide of a universe that loved to chew people up and spit them out. "So what now?" Zainara asked, breaking the silence with her characteristic pragmatism. "Now," Jax echoed, pondering the question. "Now we figure out what else this relic can do. Maybe sell the story to the highest bidder and retire on a beach planet, sun, sand, and no one trying to kill us." Zainara considered the prospect with a wistful sigh. "Sounds almost too good to be true." "Yeah, but in the meantime I suppose we keep doing what we do best," Jax replied, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "And what's that? Survive." Against all odds, with a grin on our faces and a sarcastic comment ready for any occasion. They both laughed, the sound carrying through the ship, a beacon of defiance in the face of a universe that rarely offered second chances. Together, they charted a new course, the relic's secrets still waiting to be unraveled. As the ship slipped back into the depths of space, leaving the chaos of battle behind, Jax and Zainara were ready for whatever came next. After all, they'd already learned one crucial lesson. In a galaxy full of darkness, sometimes all you needed was a relic, a bit of luck, and a partner in crime who knew how to aim straight and think crooked. The ship's console beeped, drawing Jax's attention. "Looks like we've got a transmission coming in. Want to take bets on who it is? Knowing our luck, it's probably someone else wanting to kill us," Zainara said, her tone resigned but amused. "Well, let's find out," Jax replied, opening the comm channel. The transmission crackled to life, a voice they both recognized filtering through. "Hey, Jax," Zainara. "Heard you've been causing quite the stir." Carla the Claw's voice was unmistakable, her reputation for slipping in and out of places unnoticed matched only by her penchant for theatrics. "Carla, what's the news?" Jax asked, leaning back in his seat. "Word spreading about your little escapade. Seems you've made an impression." Carla's voice was laced with amusement. "Some folks are interested in meeting with you. Might want to hear you out." Jax exchanged a glance with Zainara. "And these folks, they the kind that pay well?" "Oh, I'd say they pay better than well," Carla replied, her chuckle echoing through the comms. "But be careful, Jax. You know how the saying goes. When you dance with the devil, you better be prepared to lead." "Wouldn't have it any other way," Jax said, a sense of opportunity stirring within him. As the transmission ended, Jax turned back to the controls, a new course already forming in his mind. They were far from out of the woods, but that was just how they liked it. "Well, looks like we've got a new adventure on our hands," he said, enthusiasm coloring his words. Zainara nodded, her smile genuine. "And it's a good thing I've got a blaster and a sense of humor to match." With that, they set a new heading, the stars stretching out before them like a vast, unexplored playground. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, with a shared determination that refused to falter. The relic hummed softly in its place, a constant reminder of the power they now held, and the endless possibilities it brought with it. The relic throbbed quietly in its cradle, like a heart with too many caffeinated beverages. Jax and Zainara, having just danced with death and managed not to step on its toes, were now staring at the damn thing like it was a lottery ticket. A dangerous lottery ticket that could blow up in your face, but a lottery ticket nonetheless. "So," Jax said, voice thick with that brand of exhaustion that only comes after not dying horrifically, "we've got a super-secret, possibly planet-destroying key. What do we do with it?" Zainara flicked a glance at him, her eyes gleaming with post-battle adrenaline. "Well, we could always use it as a fancy paperweight. It'd be a hell of a conversation starter. Sure, when the conversation is how I accidentally incinerated my entire apartment block. More like how I accidentally incinerated my entire planet," Zainara snorted, holstering her blaster. "Let's avoid that headline, yeah." Jax chuckled, the sound brittle and tinged with the relief of not currently being space debris. Outside, the cosmos churned on indifferent to their little drama, nebulae swirling like cosmic washing machines. "All right, let's get serious for a microsecond. We need to stash this relic somewhere Slag and his buddies can't sniff it out. Preferably somewhere not labeled obvious hiding spot for dangerous cosmic artifacts," Zainara added, folding her arms, daring the universe to give them another problem. "How about that vault in the nebula, the one the ancients left to mess with folks like us? Yeah, because nothing says secure like a cryptic, booby-trapped vault." Jax rubbed his chin, feeling the stubble that had collected like a 5 o'clock shadow convention. "But you know what? It's our best shot. And if it gets cursed, well, better the vault than my love life. Pretty sure your love life was cursed long before the relic showed up." Zainara tapped the console, bringing up a holo map of the sector. "Punch it in. Let's go drop this thing off and then figure out how to celebrate not being blown to atoms." Jax entered the coordinates, the ship's engines humming to life like a particularly grumpy cat being woken from a nap. As they streaked towards the nebula, he leaned back in his seat, watching Zainara's profile as she stared at the readouts. "Ever think about what you'd be doing if you weren't constantly running for your life?" he asked, curiosity tinging his voice. Probably something boring like accounting or professional complaining," Zainara replied, not missing a beat. "This is more fun. Yeah, nothing beats the excitement of dodging space pirates and ancient death traps. Hey, at least we've got stories to tell," she said, her smile wry. "Not everyone gets to say they've outsmarted Slag and his band of mismatched miscreants." Jax laughed, the sound echoing through the cockpit. "Guess you're right. Beats sitting in a cubicle all day." Their conversation drifted into comfortable silence as the ship slipped through the nebula, the swirling mists creating unsettling patterns on the hull. A fitting backdrop for their latest gamble. The vault loomed ahead, an angular monstrosity carved from the bones of forgotten technology. It seemed to pulse with a malevolent curiosity, like it was sizing them up and wondering if they were worth the trouble. "Well, there it is," Jax said, voice thick with a mix of awe and apprehension. "Our very own Pandora's box. Yeah, let's just hope there's no cosmic evil stashed inside," Zainara said, crossing her fingers for luck. "We've had enough of those for one day." With a deft hand, Jax maneuvered the ship into a docking position, the relic thrumming with an almost eager energy. "Ready to go say hi to the ancients, born ready," Zainara replied, her grin ferocious. They disembarked, the relic cradled between them like an oversized football. The vault door yawned open, a gaping maw into darkness lit by the eerie glow of ancient tech. "Feels like we're disturbing something," Jax murmured, stepping inside. "Well, if they didn't want company, they shouldn't have left the door open," Zainara quipped, her voice bouncing off the walls with a cheeky echo. The interior was a labyrinth of corridors, each one more confusing than the last. They followed the path the relic seemed to guide them on, its glow a steady heartbeat in the gloom. Finally, they arrived at a central chamber, the walls adorned with cryptic symbols and the floor a bewildering mosaic of patterns. In the center stood a pedestal, waiting. "Looks like the place," Jax said, setting the relic down with a sense of finality. The moment the relic touched the pedestal, the vault came alive, lights flickering on like the world's weirdest disco party. Holograms danced and twirled, depicting scenes from a past that was as confusing as it was fascinating. "Well, that's not ominous at all," Zainara commented, watching the spectacle with wide eyes. "Yeah, like a history book on acid," Jax agreed. As they stood there watching the past unfold, the reality of their situation settled over them. They had something powerful, something that could change the galaxy if they let it. But maybe, just maybe, it was best left here in this tomb of forgotten dreams. "Think it'll be safe here?" Zainara asked, her voice softer now, almost reverent. "Safe as it'll ever be," Jax said, turning to face her. "And if it isn't, well, we'll just have to come back and blow something else up," she laughed, the sound lightening the dark atmosphere. "You know, for a guy who claims not to like adventure, you sure do end up in the middle of it. What can I say? The universe has a way of dragging me into things." Jax shrugged, offering her a lopsided grin. With the relic secured, they made their way back to the ship, their footsteps echoing in the empty corridors like a whispered promise to return. As they stepped aboard, the weight of the past few days settled on them like a heavy cloak. "Now what?" Zainara asked, collapsing into her seat with a sigh. "Now we get the hell out of here and hope Slag's still licking his wounds," Jax replied, flicking switches and bringing the ship systems online. They lifted off, the vault receding into the swirling chaos of the nebula. It was over, at least for now. But as they set their course for anywhere but here, Jax couldn't shake the feeling that their story was far from finished. "Think we'll ever see Slag again?" Zainara mused, staring out at the stars. "Probably," Jax said, "but hopefully not for a long while. I figure we've earned a break." "A break sounds nice," she agreed, her voice wistful. Silence stretched between them, the comfortable kind that comes from shared experiences and unspoken understanding. "You know," Jax said after a while, "if you ever want to part ways, I'd understand. This life isn't exactly what most would call stable." Zainara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "And miss out on all this excitement?" "Not a chance," he chuckled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the ship systems. "Guess we make a pretty good team, huh?" "Not too shabby," she conceded, a smile tugging at her lips. They sat there, watching the stars unfold before them like a tapestry of possibilities. The galaxy was vast and full of peril, but they had each other. And maybe that was enough. As the ship raced onward, leaving behind echoes of battles fought and won, they knew one thing for certain. Wherever they went, whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together, with a sardonic comment and a shared laugh ready for whatever the universe threw their way. A light on the console blinked, signaling an incoming message. Jax leaned forward, activating it. "What's the bet? Another job offer or just someone wanting to kill us? Either way, it's bound to be interesting," Zainara said, settling back with an expectant grin. The message crackled to life, delivering a voice that was both familiar and unexpected. "Hey, you two, it's Thorn. Heard you've been up to some mischief." Jax smirked, leaning back. "Thorn, old buddy. What's the word? Seems you've managed to stir up the hornet's nest," Thorn replied, amusement lacing his words. "I've got a proposition for you if you're interested." Zainara raised an eyebrow, looking to Jax for his response. "And what kind of proposition?" "Let's just say it involves more adventure and maybe a little less risk of imminent death," Thorn chuckled. "Interested?" Jax glanced at Zainara, who gave an exaggerated shrug. "Well, we've got nothing better to do," "Great," Thorne said, satisfaction clear in his tone. "I'll send over the details. And Jax, try not to blow up anything important this time, yeah? No promises," Jax replied, grinning. As the message ended, Jax set a new course, the ship humming with anticipation. Another adventure awaited, full of potential danger and unforeseen twists. But as long as they were together, they could face anything. "Ready for the next chapter?" Jax asked, glancing at Zainara. "Always," she said, determination and excitement mingling in her eyes. With a shared smile, they headed into the unknown, prepared to make their mark on whatever crazy, unpredictable, darkly humorous path lay ahead. Because in a galaxy full of chaos, sometimes all you needed was a bit of luck, a reliable ship, and a partner willing to face the madness with you.